Laura, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'd love to talk to you about employee engagement and some of your insights. But just to get us started, if you wouldn't mind giving us a brief introduction about what you're doing, your company, and how you got started with employee engagement, that'd be great.
My name's Laura Raney. I work in internal communications currently at Puppet, which is a global technology company. We are headquartered in Portland, Oregon. We have offices worldwide and employees spread across the globe. So it's really a privilege to get to work with so many different folks across the organization. I started out in HR at Alaska Airlines and developed the internal communications function there from the ground up, was there for about 11 years, and then relocated from Seattle, Washington to Portland, Oregon for my current role. So have been in internal communications almost that entire time, and have gotten to work, like I said, in the aviation customer service space, and now I'm on the technology side. So it's very different culture, very different organizational makeup. We are a team at Puppet of about 450 employees worldwide. So it looks a bit different, with this size of a team.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the difference in terms of employee engagement? How do you approach this differently?
It doesn't necessarily look all that different due to size on the engagement front. That's a great question. It really has more to do with connecting with employees on their purpose and their value of what they do, at work every day. Obviously, it's where we spend the majority of our waking hours. It's not all that different between the two companies. Tactically speaking, I would say that's where a lot of the difference lies is, at this company, most of us are sort of at our computer. So it looks a little bit different in the tactics in terms of how we reach employees, how we connect with employees, how we engage with folks. And then, of course, over the last 20 months in the pandemic world, it looks a bit different too, making sure that we're supporting and nurturing boundaries that employees have and helping them maybe reset some of those boundaries, since much of that disruption to their lives really had a lot to do, at least at Puppet, with the loss of boundaries. It wasn't so much the switch to all remote for us. We were already almost 30% of our organization was already remote based. It was more so just all of the change that happened in people's lives and making sure that their work experience was still a respectful and special place to be, where they were adding value, where they were bringing value, and where they were realizing the longer term vision of the organization.
And how do you think about employee engagement? Because you mentioned the word purpose. So is that about aligning employees to the company's purpose, or is it finding the employee's purpose? Is it more about finding passion in your work, or how do you think around that?
Oh, I love that question. You worded it in such a good way, because I think you really nailed it. It's really both. I think it's super important that employees arrive at a company or at a place in their career where they are seeking and pursuing their own purpose. They know what they want longer term. They're not, they don't necessarily need to share all of that with their manager or with their company. So it's important that employees have that space to identify and understand that and grow what they're looking for longer term, but that as important, if not more importantly, in the current day-to-day, that they are connected with and understand the company's purpose. So why are they here? Why are we here all together? What are we here for? And what are we able to collectively achieve? I think it contributes a lot to more meaningful and authentic teamwork. And it certainly does contribute to a meaningful experience behind employee engagement. You probably, say that a lot for a lot of employees. They're not thinking about employee engagement. They're worried about doing their job, meeting the needs of the customers, achieving or exceeding their goals so that they are earning their pay and maybe going home at the end of the day. They're not necessarily there for anything larger, and that's okay. So helping people understand where they can really bring that value efficiently and find success in their role. And then hopefully above and beyond that, helping one another achieve success too. So, encouraging and growing the broader team experience through our individual actions day to day is also a part of that I think is an outcome of really strong engagement. And that's really, really meaningful too. And I think that's demonstrated over time as we're able to grow and improve employee engagement. But that doesn't necessarily translate to every individual employee understanding what does employee engagement mean. We just want them to be able to achieve the outcome of employee engagement. And so we're helping them get there through the communication and the plan around that.
And if I'm interpreting it correctly, I would assume this involves both top-down communication, but also gathering information kind of bottoms up. So if that's right, how do you execute employee engagement?
Feedback is integral. We're actually coming up on an annual employee engagement survey that we do at Puppet every year. I would say that as far as I know, and in my experience, that's pretty typical to have an annual, pretty meaty survey where we're identifying and giving all employees a chance to share feedback, weigh in on certain areas of timely, interest or topics that are perhaps more time sensitive around the point in time where the business and the industry is at. There's also, a standard set of questions that we can benchmark year over year to see how we're improving and growing as a team. So that's one way that we are able to hear from employees. Of course, it's confidential, this survey, and so that's an important component. And it does give us, like I said, just a really robust data point that we can say year over year we're looking at, and we're able to use that input to inform the overall program or decisions around, company goals, decision making, and the employee experience and all the touch points associated with that. There's also feedback, that's happening in a number of other places in an ongoing manner. So we have anecdotal feedback throughout the year. We're hearing from leaders and employees alike just through conversations and how we're working together and just taking note of that. We also have pulse surveys that we do on a regular basis. And I think those are invaluable, not just where I work now, but where I've worked in the past, is being able to measure progress along the way. So one way that we're measuring progress toward second half of the year goals is to take just a number of those key questions that we feel are really important to what we're working on right now. There's 3 specific questions, and gauging employee feedback on those specific questions in a more frequent manner. So right now we're doing that monthly throughout the second half, so that we can have just a sense of how we're progressing and where there might be risk of failure in really the work towards our end goals. So that's another way where we're getting sort of a more holistic data set from different functions and employees based in different geographies around the world. And then we have exit surveys and stay interviews as well right now. And those look different year to year. Those are, reevaluated and examined for making sure that they're meaningful and that we're using the data in a meaningful way in our work. So that's an important piece. I think to go back to your original question about how we're executing the program and making good use of that data is like I said, just having that feedback loop so employees have a chance to provide feedback along the way. I think that's critical. And then the way that we're talking about it, communication is key. That's where my work is. That's where I spend all of my time is employee communications. So really making sure we're clear on what we're here for, making sure that I'm involving stakeholders in different areas of the company that have sort of a stake in the ground for our company goals, that they're really connected and informed on that data, that they have a sense of what has changed, what might be new or an area of risk based on, new data sets, and then understanding how can we respond to that. It doesn't really matter if we're not communicating. It doesn't really matter if we do a bunch of good work or implement, a change or respond to that feedback in any way if we're not telling employees what we're doing. There's just it just totally misses the mark, right? So making sure that we're creating that awareness across the company from the top down, and then through existing channels that employees are already engaging with. And then the most impactful way that I see that making a difference is from managers with their teams. So that really close firsthand connection that people have with their leaders, be it their direct manager or their senior leader that they're hearing from on a regular basis, that they're really hearing how they are seeing changes, improvements in the day-to-day and how that relates back to their work. And then ultimately goes back to that cycle of, wow, okay, I'm seeing positive change, or I'm seeing someone responding to my feedback. I said that, and this is how we're going to incorporate it. And wow, I'm really seeing a difference. And it doesn't happen overnight. It sometimes takes years. But if we're not talking about it, and if we're not acknowledging that there is attention being given to the feedback, even if it can't be solved overnight, that's really a key starting point, no matter the area of feedback that we're looking at. So that's really critical. And then spending longer term investment, meaning time, energy, not even always money. It's really just the attention that's being given to that, and being mindful of how we're incorporating that into daily conversations and then the more formalized communications that I mentioned earlier.
And can we dig a little deeper into the internal communications? You have a lot of experience in that field, so maybe you can tell us what works better. What are the key trends there? What are you seeing? Because internal communications can mean a lot of different things. So how do you collect the insights or information from the leaders? How do you communicate them to the managers? Then you mentioned the manager to the team. When you're a distributed team, how do you let the managers know what messages should be conveyed to their subordinates? How does that work?
One of the starting points in developing that reliability and the value in internal communications is helping people understand what are the reliable sources they can count on for finding information. So there's sort of a baseline starting point that I've done when I'm creating that internal communications discipline from scratch, where it's non-existent, and really building it from the ground up, is helping to identify what channels, what tools do we have in place that we can say we can plug in a reliable, consistent, easy to find, easy to understand communication that we can operationalize, that we can say this is going to be something that we can sustain over time and hopefully grow, add more value to it. But I would say fundamental to that process is identifying where are people already aware of, and where can we help them know where to go so that they can easily find information, even if they're not looking for it. Ideally, we want people to be so engaged that they're going and they're interested and they're looking at information and they're plugging in and they're reading the emails, or they're joining the meeting, whatever it might be. And that really only happens when there's engagement drawn out into the channels that we're building. So for example, maybe an email newsletter is going to work for your company if email is a reliable communication tool that people know this is a company provided tool. I'm going to plug into my email. I'm there at my desk, like I said, desk-based, teammates that they're at their computer. It's easy for them to get to it. They don't have any blockers in making the time or finding the way to get to that channel. And then it's engaging, influencers, thought leaders within the company to participate in some capacity. So at Puppet, we do a lot of different things. We have a lot of different communication channels right now. And that has a lot to do with our global reach. We have employees in almost every time zone and in a lot of different functions and expertise areas. So they're bringing a lot to the team, but they are working, many of our folks are working with customers day to day. They're working on solutions for customers. They're working on solving customers' problems. And then we have employees who are working primarily internally. They've got internal customers that they're working with and different sort of sets of stakeholders. So really making sure that we're providing value in every single communication that reaches them, information that they need and information that they want to have when they're working through their daily work. So really identifying those channels and putting in place, okay, I know every Monday when I get to work, I'm going to be able to find something here, and just identifying that channel within, a team or organization. And like I said, in addition to those sort of written or passive channels, we always have our email, we have Slack, we have sort of landing pages of an intranet-like solution. But one of the most valuable communication channels that I've seen over the course of my career and continue to see today in terms of the impact to employees is conversations, touch points with their direct manager. So to your point, making sure managers have what they need and know exactly what they need to say is absolutely essential to any sort of change communication or need to know communication that we're working on as a team. So that same goes for the leaders, is putting into place reliable channels where they know they can go to and find information that they need at that moment in time. So that looks different for us. We've evolved some of our manager communications over the last couple of years. The goal is really to simplify it. They have a lot coming at them. They have a lot of work to do. And some of them have really large teams that do require different messaging within their own team. So they really have to look at something and say, okay, here's how I'm going to message it with this group. And what do I need to message, with this group, different function or even different geo. It often looks different because it's not simple. So that's really the challenge of internal communications, is it's usually not simple, and helping to really translate and simplify how and where to find the information so leaders can take that and really have an efficient and easy impact with their team, whatever that looks like. So often it's an electronic format of, here's the information, making it as clear and concise as possible. Here's what's expected of you as a leader. Here's exactly what we're asking you to do and by when, giving them really clear and simple parameters, because like I said, they're juggling a lot. The whole goal is to not make this feel more challenging or have any roadblocks in their way or question marks, so they can just run with it. For example, if someone in Singapore needs to take this action, I may be asleep at that time. And so they don't necessarily have, nor should they need to wait for, their questions to be answered to be able to move forward with that communication. So that's a important part of the process for me, is making sure it's so clear, so simple that any manager can run with it without having to take a second look or ask follow-up questions. We also do provide that outlet for them. We also provide, Slack chats for Q&A. We provide follow-up forums, follow-up channels for people to engage and ask questions, because that's really important too. There are exceptions. There are situations where people need more clarity, and sometimes they just need to vent. So making sure that that's available to them too, and be able to have that conversation. And that usually helps inform a better process the next time around.
Any trends that you're seeing, because you mentioned engaging the the leaders within the corporation. Are you seeing any trends on how to do that effectively? Is it video? Is it some kind of different outreach? How do you create those connections and make them stronger, especially when you're completely distributed?
KP, that's a great question. And I'm going to be totally honest with you. I have had a challenging year in terms of identifying consistent trends. So when I speak with my network, my peers outside of my company, and talk with them about what challenges they're facing and what things, we're looking to discover might work well, what things are working better in this moment in time. We've not landed on one simple solution or, hey, this is working great, let's do it. The trend that I'm seeing, the activity that I'm really working to address here and now, is actually employee burnout and people just feeling overwhelmed. So I think those are two separate things. I don't want to conflate burnout with a less, a lesser evil, but it is real. And I'm seeing a lot of employees just so overwhelmed with just the uptick of personal and business communications that are coming their way, electronically and via other channels, that my goal is really to simplify and unite. So of course, we're always looking to streamline and gain efficiencies in our work, But then now it's really for the end user too, is looking at how can we simplify for you, the recipient, so that you know you're looking in one place and it's all there. And sometimes that means we're bringing together messages of various levels of gravity, you know, that isn't necessarily what I would always say to do. But if that makes it easier for an employee to find what they need in one place, then sometimes we're doing that. And that's a bit of a change. And then technically, yeah, video is a great thing. I do think that that's, you know, short, easy communications where we can make it more personable and friendly. That's always a fun win. We have more and more senior leaders connecting with their teams via video messages where they're taking their dogs out for a quick walk, and sending a note to their team. And that just makes it a little bit more that personal connection, which is always a great thing this day and age.
Awesome. Thank you very much for taking the time and sharing these insights with us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Great to speak with you.